Okay, amazing. So yeah, welcome everyone to mine and Alba's joint talk, Bonding Through Judging, Twitter's Am I the Asshole community. I am going to swear during this presentation, even if Tuya doesn't want to. So be prepared. Okie dokie. So, as Tuya in fact mentioned, we do need to thank a couple of organisations first before we start, just to acknowledge that a lot of the work that I did for creating this presentation and the paper was undertaken while I was at the University of Huddersfield. And also that we have presented a much shorter form of this paper once already at the IPRA conference, which was the July just gone. And that time we presented it, it was under the title, You're the Asshole, Building Online Community Norms Around Twitter's ITA account. And this was part of the panel Impoliteness Norms in Online Affinity Spaces, which was organised by Pilar Garces-Conejos-Blitvik and Marta Dynel. And, you know, we need to express our gratitude for them, not only letting us onto a brilliantly interesting and diverse panel of talks, but also for giving us some really great feedback where we presented there. So to introduce you to the idea of this AITA, or ITA, as we're going to be pronouncing it during this talk. So this is a group that started on Reddit, which is a discussion website that allows the sharing of multimedia content, and then users can freely log on and comment on whatever's shared there. And Reddit is organized into different sort of discussion threads. And these can be about all kinds of things, like there might be one about, I don't know, knitting or gardening or discussing certain things in the media or certain political viewpoints, etc. And people will post within those subreddits on those topics, and then other people will sort of join the conversation. And in this case, the Am I the Asshole subreddit is a place where people come to post morally ambiguous, supposedly real life situations that they are supposed to have encountered in their own personal lives. And the purpose of posting these morally ambiguous situations there is to obtain judgment from a wider audience about who was in the wrong in that situation. So there are 4 official judgments which the community can make on the person who has posted this discussion. So they can say, you are the asshole. In other words, you were definitely in the wrong and behaving in a kind of morally reprehensible manner in this situation. You're in fact not the asshole, and it was someone else who was in the wrong. Everyone sucks here, which is a judgment when just everyone's behaved appallingly, really, and there's no sort of a winner or loser in terms of who's the worst. And then there can also be a no assholes here vote, and that's usually reserved for ones where actually it's just been a bit of a misunderstanding and really no one was actually really in the wrong. So, and on Reddit, the posts will eventually get kind of tagged with a community judgment. I'm not sure quite how quickly this happens, maybe something like 1 week after posting, or maybe even a couple of days after posting. I don't know if Alba knows that either, but the way that they get the judgment that gets sort of finally attached to them, so that if you are visiting a historic post, you will see what the community verdict was on that post. The way that's done is it's the most upvoted community comment that becomes the community's overriding judgment. And this is kind of interesting because the Twitter one works quite differently, and we're going to be looking later. Alba and I are going to do a bit of a comparison as well between the Reddit and the Twitter communities. So just to give you an example of one of these morally questionable situations, I think I'm just going to read this one out to you. I think that would probably be easiest. And this is a fairly short one. Sometimes they go on for like pages and pages, giving so many, you know, different intricate details of the situation. But yeah, this is a fairly succinct one. So this person has started with this term throwaway account, which means that they've created an account specifically for the purpose of posting this story. And this typically happens because on Reddit, when you have a user account, everything you've posted on Reddit is sort of collated and collected under that username. So if you have a lot of friends or family members, people you know in the real world, people you're friends with online who follow you on Reddit, then they will see all of your posts. And sometimes I think the people here know that they're going to be judged an asshole because they create these throwaway accounts so that the people who know them in real life don't see what terrible things they've done. There's definitely other reasons for wanting to be anonymous as well, but there certainly seems to be a correlation there. So this person has said, I, age 20, male. People usually do this. They will identify themselves by a gender and an age. I don't think I did anything wrong, but my friends are all saying I'm an asshole. So I have a group of friends and we're quite frankly nerds. We met this girl I'll call Elle 2 years ago. This is also very typical that they anonymize other people in the story. And that's often to stop people who know them in real life from finding out. But often I think it's also about, just wishing for a certain degree of privacy online. The other guys all like her, think she's great. She knows all about the things we're into. But I had a feeling she's not really one of us. I put up with it for 2 years, but I can't shake the feeling. So the last time we were together before quarantine, I decided to test her nerd. She seemed surprised, but could answer all my questions until I got to Star Trek. I was feeling pretty confident until she asked me to clarify. Apparently I misspoke and accidentally asked a trick question. My friends all jumped on me, accusing me of being an asshole, and she didn't need to pass some kind of test to hang out with them, and how I needed to get over it. Another friend pointed out that I wasn't the guardian of the group. I got mad no one was on my side and left. Quarantine happened shortly after, and I recently found out they've all been chatting with her. I told her I didn't appreciate her trying to steal my friends. She never replied, but one of my friends bitched at me for a while. I got mad no one was listening to me and said, her or me? He said, her. None of my other friends have messaged me since. So this is a fairly typical am I the asshole post. This is a pretty light-hearted one. Some of them get really quite disturbing. Like some people, they're really dealing with actual kind of trauma and violence and really quite difficult themes. But this is quite a nice sort of relatively light-hearted one. And other things that posters will often include is they'll often say, am I the asshole at the end of their post? They'll often give a TLDR recap, which is a too long didn't read. So this is like a short summary for people who just want to quickly understand the situation and don't want to read a huge long post, especially on the ones that will go on for 2, 3, 4 times this kind of length. They'll often give edits on the situation, which are frequently in response to what other commenters have said below. So this, yes, it was on the lips and none of us are gay or bi. This is about another post where a group of guys were kissing each other goodbye as what started off as a bit of an in-joke, but then became a sort of ritual, and one of their girlfriends didn't like it and kept saying they were gay. So this person posted an update to just sort of clarify that part of the situation. And often people will also give later updates on what happened after they followed the advice of the commenters and things like that. And in this case, we do have an after-the-fact update, where this man said, after people had started commenting and unsurprisingly calling him an asshole, he says, I knew I shouldn't have posted here. You guys don't get it. I'm not going to apologise for being suspicious of her intentions and being angry my so-called friends bailed on me for some chick they've only known 2 years. I was not gatekeeping. I was just trying to make sure she wasn't trying to be trendy. Screw this. I won't be back. So we get quite a lot of this kind of discourse going on as well. So that was all from the subreddit, and that's where this group originated. And then I think about 3 years ago, a user on Twitter set themselves up as a kind of official reposter of the Reddit threads. They're not affiliated with Reddit. They absolutely appear to be one individual human being. So in other words, it's not a bot that's scraping Reddit and reposting automatically. And it's not a collection of people, because they often talk about themselves and say that, yeah, I'm just one person. And a lot of the statistics on their accounts seem to support that. Like, we sort of dug into a few of the stats. And for example, they always post between like waking hours of the day, and they've never once posted between the hours of about 1 a.m. and 8 a.m. So they seem to follow a sort of normal human day-night cycle. So there's a lot of evidence this is just one person who is just doing this for fun. They're not affiliated with the Reddit group. The OPs, this is the original posters. This is an abbreviation we're going to be using throughout the presentation. These people from Reddit, they don't necessarily know that their content is being reshared on Twitter. And we're going to come back to that point a little bit later. And the Twitter account, as of about 3 days ago, when I grabbed this screenshot just in order to make sure it was really up to date, was nearly on 550,000 followers. So this is a really good, big following for a Twitter account. And just a quick note, they changed their name recently, and I don't think they said why, from ita_Reddit to ita_online. But a lot of our screenshots are from back when we did data collection about a year ago. So you will see this username on several of the screenshots. It's the same person, it's not two separate accounts. It's just one that's changed their name. So we've got a fundamental difference between the Reddit posts, which are on the left of the screen, and the Twitter posts on the right. And you can see in the top left of the Reddit post that the bot has been through all the comments and has given this person everyone sucks a judgment. This is a different post to the one at the beginning. I'm not going to explain all of this. I'm not going to explain this peanut butter one in detail. I don't have time for me to tell you every single story. But if you find them amusing or interesting, please do go and look, in your own time at some of these posts. You'll have a laugh at most of them. So in Reddit, the commenters, the reason they're commenting is to directly interact with the original poster. Whereas on the Twitter group, the commenters seem to be just interacting with each other, that purely for like community engagement or for doing a bit of like personal identity construction by showing their unique understanding of moral order, or they're interacting for just like humor and bonding to create this kind of, well, Alba's going to do the literature review in a moment and talk about, affinity spaces and relational work and all of that kind of thing, which is what they seem to be doing on Twitter. So those commenters can interact directly with the original poster. These guys seem to just be talking for the joy of building a community. So now I'll pass over to Alba.
Thank you, Liz, and hello, everyone. So as Liz said, there are many things going on here, but the most important one is that the person behind the ita account is taking screenshots that were meant for a specific context and then sharing them somewhere else. And this is the idea of recontextualization, which was defined by Gruber, for example, as the insertion of a discourse element from a source context into a target context, in this case, a different social network, which works quite differently. And there have been some papers who are addressing this kind of content, because on Twitter, it happens with other accounts. And for example, there is a paper by Marta Tainel, which addresses, and I apologize, reposts from shit my reviewers say. So basically, people send screenshots and screen captures of awful reviews from, when we try to publish in a journal, and we all know how hard that is. And it's the same, basically. You go on Twitter and then they share the screenshot and people comment on it and like it. And what Marta Tainel shares is that this the very act of changing the background and posting it somewhere else must be approached anew in this new context. And this is what Liz and I try to do on Twitter, because it changes. It's true that it doesn't change maybe as much as it does in other cases of recontextualization, because, for example, in the case of Marta Dynell's study, you are a single researcher who has received a review, which is not that great, and it brings you down, and then you share it with everyone so that everyone can comment on it and maybe try to cheer you up a little bit, commenting on how awful the reviewer was. But in our case, the idea stays pretty much the same, because everyone's still commenting on this specific case of this person who had something happen to them. But on Twitter, they are commenting, as Liz said, for themselves. So the only thing that we are losing is this direct connection with the person who is trying to, well, ask for advice, because on Twitter, they won't reach the OP as they would on Reddit. And then the role of the ITA online account is kind of just sharing these different cases of people, and we will see how this person selects them. And they kind of behave as a voice of collective experience. They do share their position on some cases, but basically they are just there to take content from Reddit and then move it onto Twitter so that everyone can enjoy themselves. And the main difference on what we are trying to do with this is that what we want to look at is the community that is created within the comments of Twitter. Because, for example, in Marta Dynell's case, she was looking at the reviews themselves and how their meaning changed when they were reposted. So that's what we want to explore. Liz, if you can go to the next slide.
I forgot that was my job still.
No worries. So our data actually are the reply tweets. Of course, we are looking at the posts that originated all the comments, but our main interest is how people interact with these tweets. And what we did is a qualitative analysis from a selection of the responses that Liz will explain how we selected these threads, because we did not do that qualitatively, but our method of analysis is qualitative. And basically we are looking at posts who had very high engagement, so lots of likes, retweets, and comments of different kinds. Our analytical focus is on the creation of an affinity space within the Twitter community, on how on the comments, all the Twitter users take radical stances regarding, well, the cases that are shared on Twitter, how most of the time they approach all the situations with humor and conversational humor, that is humor that is negotiated and situated in every single case. Then there's the creation of this ambient affiliation. I will explain a bit about it on the following slide. And finally, how this community seems to perceive and share a common moral order on what is right and what is wrong. And it's very interesting to see what happens when someone comments on a different line of thought, how there are some Twitter users who attack this person for thinking differently. Attack in a mild way. It's nothing violent. So the relevant concepts that we are working with, obviously the concept of a virtual community. Here's a definition that we can use: social aggregations that emerge from the net when enough people carry on those public discussions long enough with sufficient human feeling to form webs of personal relationships in cyberspace. And this is definitely the case, although we must say that it is hard for a profile like the ITA Online one that has more than 500,000 followers to form a close-knit community. But as Liz will explain later, there are many users who have a more relevant role, and that helps a lot. So there are like different groups of people within this huge community. An idea that has comes up quite a bit in the recent literature concerning the study of online communities is the idea of this affinity space, affinity being the keyword in this case, where people join together when they share a deep passion for anything. It can be knitting, as Liz said, for Reddit, but in our case is a deep passion for judging, we would say, because this is basically what they do. But we would say that it's just giving their opinion and taking stances about what is right and wrong, and basically acknowledging or knowing that their stance is shared by a community, and therefore forming a bond that, of course, is very significant emotionally. And then there's also the idea of this ambient affiliation, affiliation being the process by which people involve themselves in social bonds. Affiliation is a term that is also mentioned in conversation analysis, being the case where a response by a following turn, let's say, or a second pair part is mentioned by someone does not only align, but also affiliate emotionally with what they said. And Zappa Viña introduces this idea of ambient through the study of hashtags. She follows how people who want to create this kind of ambient affiliation use the very same hashtag, so that when another user clicks on that hashtag, they can then recover all the tweets that shared the same kind of opinions. And these are the main ideas and concepts that we work with in the paper. So how do we go about establishing, or how are affinity spaces established? It's not something we can definitely do voluntarily, although we can try. But when we address affinity spaces, there are different considerations that we must take account of. For example, how complex participation frameworks are within any kind of social media, but Twitter specifically. Because how can we establish how much is someone participating? Just by reading the tweet, maybe giving it a like, maybe participating in a poll, maybe commenting on it? Could we maybe establish some kind of gradient degree of participation? And we will see how we try to approach this. And there's also the problem of addressivity, which has been addressed in this paper, for example, by Vladimiru et al., which is, who are these people talking to? Who are they when they comment on an ITA post? Are they addressing the OP who will not get their answers? Are they actually addressing everyone else on the ITA community, everyone else on the internet? And this is, we think that this is very interesting to explore. Other characteristics that we find in affinity spaces and internet communication in general is the escalation or upscaling that usually happens whenever you can take sides in a matter, which is basically we usually interact with people who share our views. So by doing so, whatever we share in common is stronger, and that the outgroup or anyone else who is out of our beliefs, then we wouldn't say hate them, but we, let's say, our dislike grows even more. And this is a concept of escalation. Whenever you find people who agree with you, then the extremes are even more extreme, if we could say. What are the characteristics of an affinity space? Where, as some authors have explored in previous literature, there's the use of specific slang within the members, and we will give examples of all of these aspects. There's conversational humor, even though it is hard in some cases when the situations are maybe not as funny as the ones we have seen so far about the peanut butter and the kissing on the lips, which you can take more or less lightly. But as you will see when we give you the titles of the 10 most popular posts, some of the situations are actually quite serious. So with Liz, this is one of the ideas that we want to explore, whether the seriousness of the situation actually has an effect or in the kind of comments that we get, in the use of memes or GIFs or emojis even. This is something that maybe in the future we will try to address. Then there's, of course, situational humor, which is created within the community and which is very related to the intertextuality. The followers of this account have been following this account for a while, or at least are familiar with different cases that have happened before, different situations that have been shared, and it's very interesting to see how they mention them and then people recognize them and talk about them. And very interestingly for us as well, anything related to the moral order and how we judge what is right, what is wrong, what is acceptable or unacceptable in different situations. And then finally, all of this happens on Twitter, and Twitter is one of the most researched social networks that there are, basically because it is the ease with which you can actually study all the tweets and retweets. Even Twitter makes it easier for any researchers to recover data, although the more detail you need, the more you will need to ask for advice. But Liz was the expert in this case, so she will address this. But Twitter is a fast-paced public microblogging site with one-to-many communication. One tweet can reach pretty much the whole world. And the way in which users interact in this network is through likes, comments, and retweets. Although replying obviously is not mandatory, but when it does, it adopts a sequential organization, which is basically a consequence of the UI of how it works. Let's say how the interface works, because you have one comment and then underneath you have the answer and then another answer. This means that it creates massive polylogs or multi-participant interactions. It's the same as in YouTube, for example, with the different comments. So there are many different social networks that work in the same way. And usually when a user has a huge number of followers, they can consider them a fan base. Usually when this is famous, a celebrity or someone who is famous. But in our case, which is the person behind the account is actually anonymous, they actually consider the followers sort of a community with whom they connect, manage, and share these specific situations.
We're back to me now to talk about the methodology and the kind of aims of our research. So one of the main tools we used to just kind of start dealing with what could have been a really enormous and unmanageable data set was we wanted to identify a sort of top 10 tweets by this account, just to narrow things down. We needed pretty much any way to make the data set a little bit smaller because we weren't going to do a quantitative analysis for this. We really wanted to look into it qualitatively. So it needed to be something that two humans could do. So we used the website socialbearing.com, and this is a really powerful website actually that can load tweets from a user. It can show like how long they've been on Twitter, all kinds of other type of analytics. It even has a basic like sentiment analysis tool built in, but it definitely wasn't built by a linguist because it's just slightly odd. Just a disclaimer there, but it's cool that it has that, you know. So we used this website to load the maximum possible number of tweets that the website itself would allow. So you just have to keep clicking load more, load more, load more until it says, I cannot. And then that's it, you've reached the limit. And we were able to get a list of 3,219 of ITA Online's tweets, and those covered a period of 381 days. And at the time of data collection, which I think Alba and I actually started collecting the data, was it about a year ago? Maybe a little longer than that. So at that time, ITA Online had been tweeting for 467 days. So the tweets we managed to load were like 82% of the things they had tweeted. So we were using a big chunk of what they had tweeted thus far. And Social Bearing also allows you to organize the tweets that it pulls out by different parameters. So you can organize them by the number of favorites that they've accrued, by the number of retweets, by the amount of engagement. So we organized them by all those different parameters and wrote down like the top 20 that appeared at the top of the stack each time. And then we gave each of those a number, like 1 through 20, and then we kind of used the numbers to work out which 10 were the consistently highest across all those metrics. And we also gathered the number of replies, which sadly we had to do manually by going to Twitter and just looking at each one. Of course, I didn't do this for 3,000 tweets. I just did this for the sort of 20 that were appearing at the top of the lists each time. And by using all of those different metrics and kind of averaging across the 4, we've got a list of 10 that were like really consistently performing well across all those parameters. And the stats are just the lowest number of favorites of anything in our data set and the highest number, and the same for retweets, engagement and replies. So they've all had a really decent amount of response from the community. The engagement rate looks quite low, but actually this is kind of quite typical for Twitter because only a very small proportion of any one user's followers will ever see the things they tweet, because people tend to follow like more than one account. Like I follow probably like 800 people, which is really excessive, but that means that I hardly see any tweets from each individual of all of those I follow. And that's what drives the engagement rate down. So like the literally highest we got was nearly 10% of their community had seen the tweet. So, and our aim by getting this kind of top 10, once we had those, was to look at the interactions of the Twitter community and including the types and the roles of the users, which Alba mentioned very briefly, that we have people who are kind of self-selected to do different things within the community. And we also wanted to look at different styles of user posts, comments on the moral order, multimodality, intertextuality, and we have an aim in the future to compare the sort of comments that the Twitter reposts draw with the kind of comments that happen on the original Reddit posts. And maybe even to look at the interaction between those, because as we'll see in a few slides' time, some of those comments find their way onto Twitter as well. And then there becomes a sort of inter-site conversation in various ways. It's an extremely complex community. The more we've dug into it, the more we've realized how incredibly complex the interactions within this community are. So this is just a screen grab of the social bearing, like spit out of data. You can see there's a whole bunch of stuff that it can show you. I feel like one of the interesting things is, so all these tweets, pretty much all of them are Reddit reposts, but not quite all. But also what they're doing is replying to their community. So that it's not like where you sometimes get a bot that will just scrape another website and bring stuff across, but it won't comment to people, it won't reply to the replies. Whereas this user does actually sometimes join in the discussion. And in fact, they've replied twice as much as they've done original tweets. And yeah, so we see that, yeah, they're interacting with their community of followers. So back over to Alba, the role of ITA online.
Thank you, Liz. So as you've said, the role of ITA online, previously ITA Reddit, is to take screenshots of those spicy situations on Reddit and repost them. But it's very interesting to see how they actually do that, because they do look for interesting situations or the kind of situations that they think that will arise a lot of discussion and entertainment for their followers. But they do take suggestions as well. So any Twitter user can write a DM, a direct message to the account, and actually say, I've seen this this post on the subreddit, maybe it would be interesting for everyone to see. But it's also very interesting how, well, and here you have, two examples of those. And we find that it's very funny sometimes when they apologize preemptively, because they know how horrible in many different ways the situation will be. For example, the peanut butter one, where, well, I think you know what I mean. But so they apologized beforehand, and they said 7 of you, so 7 different Twitter users actually asked them to repost this screenshot. And this is very interesting because they know that it has to be reposted through the account so that all the community will be able to enjoy it. So it's not like they can, as a different personal user, repost the story, because it won't be the same. It's actually the role of this account. And here you have two examples of apologies. But it's very interesting to see as well how they will not share any personal situations that Twitter users want to share, because that is not the purpose of this ITA account on Twitter. That is actually the purpose of Reddit. This is where you should go if you want people to actually give you advice. And it's very interesting to see how the person behind the account justifies this, because if the more interesting or controversial Reddit post is, the more interaction it gets. Saying yes or no to people on Twitter means actually telling them that maybe their problem is not interesting enough to share with everyone. And that is quite harsh. And they do not want to be put in that position. So what they do in this case is to refer everyone back to Reddit. So maybe you can go to Reddit and then share your problem there, and maybe then it can come back to Twitter later on. What they also do is they are seen by the Twitter community as the intermediary, since they are the ones who take the screenshots and then repost them. And it's interesting to see how in the cases where the situation is especially delicate or serious, and as you can see in this screenshot, Twitter users are concerned for the safety or well-being of the original poster on Reddit. They ask the person behind the ITA Twitter account if they know anything, if they can do anything, if they can contact anyone, to which they reply that there's nothing they can do because they have no relation to the subreddit. So the only thing they can do is just follow the subreddit and be on the lookout for any updates for everyone. The fact that they take content from Reddit and post it on Twitter has sometimes led to OPs from Reddit complaining to the Twitter account about, I didn't want to share, or I didn't want my problem to be seen by, 500,000 users on Twitter. But in this case, the reply that the account gives is, I'm not an expert, but I don't think that's how the internet works. Although as researchers who work with internet data, we know how that's not exactly true, because you will see in these presentations that we try to anonymize everyone. So it's not as easy as saying, since you posted it online for everyone to see, you can use it whenever you want. But in this case, that is their defense. And as you can see by the number of likes, it seems to be widely accepted. But of course, people want to have fun. So what are they gonna say? Other functions that they adopt in some cases, which shouldn't be necessary really, but in this case, this is quite a recent post, as you can see. But in this situation, am I the asshole for telling my cousin about the light bulb mouth fact? The light bulb mouth fact actually consists of taking a light bulb and putting it in your mouth. So basically you put it in your mouth and you are able to put it in your mouth, but once it's in your mouth, you cannot take it out. And this is what the post is about, basically two people daring each other to do it. And we think that it's very funny that the person behind the ITA account has to actually say, please don't try this at home, because they can already imagine, I guess they know their community and they can imagine people doing it themselves just to try it out. And then something else that they are expected to do is whenever they share a especially controversial or delicate, serious situation, if there are any content warnings or trigger warnings, they must say so before sharing the screenshot from Reddit, so that if there are any Twitter users who might be triggered by the content of the post, can stay away from them, therefore avoiding any complicated situations. And then very interestingly, while we were preparing the situation, and we both of us follow the account, so we are on the lookout for any news. This happened, which is again, it proves that this is a real person behind the account, just one person. I think the only personal information we know about them is that they have a partner. I don't know if it's a wife or if it's a man or a woman, but it's very interesting to see that even though they do this for entertainment, sometimes it's hard. And we can imagine, knowing how the internet works and Twitter works, the kind of private messages they might be getting in some cases, and hate and other kind of, well, very impolite messages and comments. So in this case, they made it obvious for everyone to see, and they actually didn't allow anyone to reply to this thread. They just wanted to share why they had been away for a while, because usually they post maybe one situation or two per day, I think, Liz, if I'm not wrong. But in this case, there was maybe a week or two or more where they didn't post anything. So we can also guess that many people actually wrote to them, asked them if they were okay. So this was what they said. They don't want it to be an obligation. They want to have fun with it, but obviously it is hard sometimes. So this is, after all the analysis that Liz explained, this is the list of the top 10 tweets. These are the tweets that gained more engagement in the forms of likes, comments, and retweets, as you can see. They all start, am I the asshole for, destroying my homeowners association, ruining Christmas, telling my sister her daughter's name is stupid. As you can see, there's a variety of situations, some of them, as I mentioned before, more serious than others, more delicate than others. For example, number 5, am I the asshole for banning my husband and father-in-law from the delivery room due to their intensely stressful, creepy behavior during my pregnancy? Was one of the most stressful that we have seen on sorry, Liz.
Not look that one up.
Yeah, no, that one was actually, well, when you end up being concerned about people's mental states. But as we've said, you've got some funny ones, but then you've got some serious ones. And the one marked in yellow is actually different, because as you can see, it's number 9 on the engagement rate. But in this case, this happened during the during the pandemic, which we are still living in, because they wanted to cheer everyone up. So in this case, am I the asshole for stealing the bath mat while my owner was in the shower is supposed to be said by a pet who is sharing, some mischief that they did, so that everyone basically just replied, sharing stories about their pets and then pictures about their pets, and everything was very cute, and it kind of generated a lot of affiliation and solidarity building and just bonding among all the different users. And one of the questions one of the things that we wonder about, which is, I think it's very common for any Reddit posts, Twitter posts, Instagram posts, anything on social media really, is, are these real? Did all of this actually happen? This person who wrote this original poster, who shared their situation, are they telling the truth? But what if they're not? In our case, we feel that this is maybe not as relevant as it would be if we were studying something else, because we are looking at the engagement within the community. But it is something to wonder about, all the more so, Liz, if you can go to the next slide. All the more so if we take into account that there are some common threads and topics that usually always come up on the subreddit. And here you have a bingo, ITA bingo card, which basically means that every time there is a new ITA post, you can actually see how many of these different topics will be mentioned in it. In this case, it is filled because it was referring to a specific post. But as you can see, there is food tampering, misleading title, which is quite common. People making it up to be that I am not the asshole when actually they are. I love especially the one that is yikes, yikes, yikes. There's another one that is all the red flags, which usually involves obviously in personal relationships. there's a lot of fragile masculinity, etc. So if we take into account that usually there are common topics, there are some people who believe, and they will mention it both on Reddit and Twitter, this looks as if it's so perfect an ITA topic that probably it is made up. And it might be the case, but since everything is anonymous, we really do not have any way of finding out. And as we said with Liz, we are interested in looking at the comments and how through the comments and engagement, the community is built. So how do these Twitter users engage with ITA_online? Basically, you've got favorites and likes, which is, well, likes are the most obvious one. There's also retweets, but then there are comments where many different things can happen. You can have one of these, you can have more than one of these, like, for example, paraphrasing the story or summarizing what different OPs want. They give judgment, they give advice, they just make humorous comments for the rest of the Twitter community engagement. They use GIFs to pass judgment or give advice. They use memes as well. And as Liz will explain, even they take further screenshots of the answers that the original poster gives on Reddit, because as an original poster, you open a new thread with your story, but then of course you can follow all the comments and you can reply to the comments. So sometimes people just take screenshots of those replies so that everyone can have more context in order to judge what happened.
We do have some users in the community that have either literally created an account to fulfill a specific role, or it's a user with like a normal personal account, but who also takes on a specific duty within the ITA online community. So one of these people, we've designated her as our sort of top group community member based on another load of quite complicated metrics, basically of how much she interacted with those top 10 posts and the community's reaction to her engagement with those posts. Because as you can see here, this, which is another Reddit repost, has got like nearly 500 retweets, quote tweets, likes, etc. So this user has taken it upon themselves to post comments from the Reddit group. So rather than posting the actual like ITA post itself, they will go to Reddit and they will often take the OP's comments. But if there's some particularly sort of hilarious things or things that this person deems interesting going on with the Reddit commenters, they will take a screen grab of that and will bring it across, almost always with some type of personal comment, like here they've said, "Oh my God, this is so fucked up." So we also have this user donut interns, and this appears to be not one single human. They've often said that they are multiple people running this account. And this account has literally been created to put polls onto ITA posts so that the community can show how they feel, how they are judging the original poster. And I'm going to talk about polls a few slides ahead, because these polls are really, really interesting and are a great metric for seeing what the sort of community feeling is about a specific ITA post. Then we have this user, Whole Man Disposal Services, and we should note that they exist sort of generally on Twitter rather than like the donut polls. That user has created themselves specifically to interact with ITA, the ITA reposter. But this Whole Man Disposal, they exist on Twitter sort of generally. And when they see a post about a man doing something sort of dreadful or obnoxious, they will post a comment saying that they are going to come and collect this man in a sort of fictional van and dispose of him. And there was obviously when ex-President Trump was ousted from office, they did a very popular post which was saying something along the lines of, "Oh, this is like our biggest disposal job yet." And they had a sort of picture of a cartoon of Trump sort of flying into space, and you know, they were saying that, you know, we've got rid of him. We have another post from them. They often combine their call outs with funny GIFs, like this dog driving the van. And we'll have a few more screenshots from this user later in the presentation as well, because it's quite interesting how they interact with the ITA account. And then we have other core members who their role just seems to be that they are what some other social researchers have called, social media researchers, I knew I had a word missing there. People have called these people like super posters. And they tend to be people who will guide a community in a specific direction. And a lot of the work that's been done around super posters is actually, sadly, about people who are quite negative and who lead sort of almost cult-like behavior or political swings in a certain direction or anti-rhetoric that's against certain groups. But this is not the case here. What we have is just a very sort of committed group of core users who will consistently post on huge numbers of this ITA account's retweets. And because they post so often, other more casual members of the community look out for them. And if the moral order of these kind of super posters is aligning with the more casual users, they will often get a sort of following of people who will say, yeah, I always look out for what you say on these posts. Oh, you always say the right thing. I always agree with you, sort of thing. So in this case, this person was noticed by the media as having been an extremely core member of the group and was invited to give an interview about their interaction with the ITA account. And they were kind of expressing that they didn't know why anyone would read that interview and no one's going to care about their opinions. And then there was an absolute outpouring of community support for them saying, no, we always look for your posts. You're everyone's favorite. Like, you have such great opinions, this sort of thing. And then we have another guy who, he's actually, out of context, this kind of makes no sense. He's talking about a black cat that has a white mark on its face that's kind of roughly in the shape of a penis. And he's talking about how he would treat this cat. And then other people have commented below his funny post, you know, saying, oh, I always love seeing what you say about these posts. And then another user who always posts, she's actually known for doing like verbal puns on ITA posts. But yeah, other people are saying, you know, I always look out for your responses and, you know, you really make me laugh. So those are people who really, they kind of hold up the community and they make it quite a positive place, because most of these people who get really high engagement, who get consistently high engagement, should I say, are people who are very positive community members. Although occasionally you will see someone who has an opinion that goes very much against the moral order of the main group of followers. And they will get a lot of engagement for their single comment on one ITA post because they're showing an understanding of it that goes against what the community consider to be like normative correct behaviour. So there was a homeowners association post that is actually the most it's our top #1 post from the ITA account. And someone who's something like an estate agent came on and said an opinion that was basically that the original post was lying and making it all up, and why don't you show us your documentation and provide some evidence for what you've said? And everyone just piled on and said, oh yeah, they should do all this unpaid labour for you, a random stranger on the internet, you know, get out of here, who do you think you are, kind of thing. So back to the idea of polls, which I introduced a few slides ago. So this Donut Interns user, this is just their sort of landing page on Twitter. They specifically describe themselves as being here for the ITA dilemmas and for creating polls. So, as I said before, they're run by multiple people and it's specifically to serve the ITA community. And they will post these polls, and you'll see that on this particular one, we have nearly 13,000 votes on this poll. And what's a really interesting thing that we've noticed is participation in the polls is often higher than the sort of number of favorites, retweets, comments that the actual ITA original post on Twitter, the repost, is even gaining. And one of the things we hypothesize here is one of the reasons that people participate in polls is that it's completely anonymous in the sense that on Twitter, if you like a post, someone else can come to your account, go onto your little likes tab and see all the things you've liked. So if you're a person like my account, I participate in Twitter generally, but also I'm trying to maintain somewhat of a professional face. So I try not to like anything that would be seen as really problematic, because then that will get attached to my personal account. But I can participate in polls with impunity if I wish, because that doesn't get attached to your account if you've clicked on it. So we think that maybe perhaps that's one reason. And another reason is with polls, until you've chosen an answer, you can't see what everyone else has said. So in these polls, they're a genuine show of group agreement, because no one who is voting on this poll can see that the vast majority of others have already chosen you're the asshole. They don't get that readout until they have participated themselves. So that is also a draw to participate, because you want to see what everyone else is saying. And what's interesting is that other community members are very aware that users with special duties exist. And in this case, someone wanted to post a follow-up poll, and this was on the Homeowners Association, our top-level post. And homeowners associations are a very common thing in America, but it was obvious from a lot of the comments that they were not such a known phenomenon elsewhere in the world. So this person created a poll just to find out how common this was as a concept elsewhere, outside of the US. But what's interesting is that they asked the permission of donor interns, because they know, oh, that's the user with this specific role, and I'm kind of usurping that role here. So, they say, I hope you don't mind that I'm making a poll. Of course, anyone on Twitter can make a poll anytime they want. But I think it's lovely that they've acknowledged that donor interns has this very specific job within that community. And now back over to Alba to explain some of the community norms.
Yes, thank you, Liz. So now that we've kind of gone through all these users with specific duties, let's look at some of the defining norms for the community. And one of the first ones is intertextuality. And it's how within the comments they reference previous situations, previous judgments they passed on different cases. And the best example for that is actually an opinion or judgment that has become a meme in itself, both on Reddit and Twitter, which is the one that you can see here. The Iranian yogurt is not the issue, which came about because there was a girl sharing how her partner collected the yogurts from all over the world, and especially, some kind of strange and very hard to get Iranian yogurts, and he kept them all over the house, and some of them, had gone bad, and she was concerned about. But what was interesting is that besides the yogurt situation, there were many things about her relationship with her partner that were not working and were actually concerning. So that's when one of the users actually replied, the Iranian yogurt is not the issue. This is the least of your concerns. You should maybe consider breaking up with this person. So this has become a meme that people use when an account made by OP kind of misses the point. So they are on the right track, but maybe they are not seeing the whole picture. And it's very interesting to see, because sometimes when it comes up, newer members who are maybe not familiar with that specific case actually don't know they don't understand what it says. I think if you just type Iranian yogurt on Google right now, you would get the original Reddit post explaining what happened. But we really like this comment because it actually addresses ITA vets, so ITA veterans who have been, know you have been here for many years. Can you please tell me what this is about? And like this, there are many cases, but this is a great one because there's actually a meme that came out of it. And then there's also a lot of jargon, not only ITA specific, which is the acronyms that Liz already explained at the beginning, not the asshole, you are the asshole, everybody sucks here, or non-assholes here. Then there's also the pet tax that any user has to pay when they participate in the polls that Liz described. And they make a mistake, or at least they say that they make a mistake. So in order to apologize for it, they need to share a picture of their pets, like a cute picture of a dog or a cat. We've also have lots of abbreviations. A lot of them are already used directly in OP's original post. So daughter-in-law, significant other, boyfriend, lol, obviously, in my opinion, to be honest, shaking my head, not gonna lie, these are quite internet wide used, let's say, and there's also internet slang in general as well. It's internet slang, and at the same time, most of them have become memes as well. It's hard to draw the line sometimes on what exactly they are, but we stand something by meaning we support something. Yes, queen, this is a red flag. Sometimes even instead of saying red flag, just using the emoji for the red flag. This is funny as fuck, or X being whatever adjectives you want to use. My freedoms, making fun of mostly liberal Americans and their view on politics. OP for original poster, not safe for work. Chef's kiss, I'm team X, which well originated, I'm guessing, from the Twilight Team Jacob, Team Edward dichotomy. And then mostly on posts that are specifically controversial, serious, etc. There's a lot of what we have called social vocabulary, but we feel that these are specialized terms. Maybe it's because people are now more engaged in social media, and they actually carry out serious discussions on it. But words like ableist, masculine fragility, gatekeeping, gaslighting, they have become very common terms on social media, so we can find them as well. Then it's very nice as well to see how users support each other. We saw this well when the previous user asked what the yogurt was. Obviously, many people replied explaining what it was, but sometimes the situations that are explained by the OPs are so bizarre and involve so many people that it's hard to keep track of who's whom. Many times when there's a lot of family members involved. So in this case, a Twitter user actually drew a diagram or a chart so that everybody could understand who OP was, who he was talking about, the relationships. And so you can see here, father-in-law, mother-in-law, etc. So they do try to help each other, or they try to make it easier for everyone to be on the same page so that they can start their judging and condemning. And you can also see this support in this case where anyone can just ask a question and another member of the community will reply and explain. Then there are many cases of humor and multimodality in all the replies. In this case, you can see another example of the home and disposal services that Liz has talked about before. In this case, they came unannounced to take out the trash, let's say, the trash being they are taking sides, and we will see another example here, but they will take away one of the persons involved in the situation, in this case accompanied by a gift, and they actually make a joke about the situation. In this situation, this is one of our top 10 posts. There were two sisters, and one of them wrote a ITA post saying that her sister was making fun of the name she chose for her daughter, but it was actually a name that kind of followed from her culture. So it was actually a bit offensive that she would criticize that. And then she shared the name that her sister had chosen. I think it was the sister-in-law, because yes, sister-in-law, otherwise it doesn't make sense. But the sister-in-law had chosen for her own child. So the sister-in-law had chosen the name well, you will see it written. I don't know how to pronounce McKennedy or something like yeah. Yeah, you will see it maybe on
it's the last
on the
one.
last one. Yeah, I don't even know how to pronounce this.
It's McKennedy.
Well, so the sister-in-law who was criticizing this kind of ethnic name that OP had chosen for her child had chosen the name McKennedy, written in such a, well, to me, but I'm not a native speaker of English, so this is, I don't even know how to start to pronounce this. So as you can see, if Liz, you can go back to the Holman Disposal Services tweet here. Yeah, they actually make a joke with the McKennedy therapy. So they will just take away the sister-in-law. Then you've also got a meme, which is using, as you can see, like the image of the meme does not change and it's not manipulated in any way. It just applies in this case because it's a woman. So the judgment, not the asshole, your sister is a piece of work, and accompanying the judgment, you can see that the 3 volumes, this chick is an absolute first-rate twat, to kind of amplify the judgment. We've also got the use of more gifs in this case, and I thought I had steeled myself to whatever horror Denise's name would be, and I was so unprepared and so wrong, because of course McKennedy is just the way it's spelled. So here you have a GIF that actually shows or accompanies the emotion that is transmitted through the writing. And then we've got another meme. In this case, it is made specifically for, so they have taken an image that is used many times for, well, you can see what kind of woman they are trying to portray here, choosing, let's say, just refusing some names that might have worked, all of them a bit questionable maybe by how they are written, and finally settling for McKennedy written like that. So these are the kind of humor that you can see, and as Liz has said, there are some other users who use puns all the time, and when they are specifically funny, of course, they are rewarded with lots of engagement via likes, retweets, and more comments just saying, that was great, so funny, ha ha ha, even. And then, even though there is a lot of humor and just maybe lighthearted comments, as we saw with the jargon, where there are people who actually use specialized terms to talk about, well, social life and relations, there are people who actually develop judgments and justify them, and kind of even take more than one tweet to explain and share their view on the subject. And in this case, as you can see, this was about the Homeowners Association, which basically in the post, OP had quite a bit of trouble following the Homeowners Association's, let's say, dictations, like you can do this, you cannot have this in your garden. So they basically became part of the Homeowners Association and then abolished it. So they destroyed the Homeowners Association from within. So that case gave rise to a lot of comments on this kind of organizations, how they work, what they defend, freedom, of course. So here you have a lot of comments talking about this, even racism in this case, not to get too serious, but I got curious about the history of the homeowner associations, because my racism senses were a tingling. And then here you can see, according to this person's research, that the origin of HOA seems to be keeping out, well, specific ethnicities from different neighborhoods. And here you can see more. I think we have another example, Liz, if I'm not wrong, in this case. Yeah, maybe in this case not as elaborate as the previous ones, but as you can see, there are no emojis, there are no GIFs, there are no memes that accompany this comment. It's just a more or less serious comment to reflect on the screenshot, on the repost.
And it does also draw on this person's like personal experience. Of course, you can't know that that's like an 100% true report, but a lot of these like serious comments will draw on someone's experience of a very similar or comparable situation. And that leads on really nicely to a quick talk about the moral order. We are getting close to the end now. I'm sorry, this has been such a long presentation. Again, we're talking about the homeowners associations. So the community moral order is like pretty, everyone has like a very similar opinion of those who follow the account. And it's possibly like a self-reinforcing thing, because those who generally express a moral order that goes against the general community moral order tend to get kind of shouted down, insulted, explained why they're wrong, etc. So we've got a community here who are pretty sort of lefty, liberal, LGBTQ supportive, non-racist. You know, those are the general kind of identities that they construct through their comments. So we've got, this one was the, am I the asshole for ruining Christmas and New Year's Eve? Basically, the couple who were hosting all of these events, it was Thanksgiving, and they were lined up to host Christmas and New Year's after also hosting Thanksgiving. And the parents of the host had the sort of gall to say, oh, by the way, we've removed you from our will because you haven't had any children and therefore you don't contribute to this family. And basically the husband and wife were like, get out, get the fuck out of our house. Like, how dare you say we don't contribute when we've made you Thanksgiving dinner and you expect to be at our house for Christmas and New Year. And obviously they got huge amounts of support from a lot of people who had this sort of moral order understanding that a woman shouldn't be reduced to her biology, and that people's only worth in society wasn't just to produce more people, and that there are other ways of contributing to a family other than just making babies. So a lot of these perspectives were shown on this post. And then this one's really interesting. This one was about someone who had become basically an obsessive collector of, they're called Funko Pops. They're little figurines of popular characters in the media. Let's just put it that way and not explain it further than that. So this person had got an enormous collection of these ornamental figurines. And this comment's quite interesting because it constructs a moral order of no one should police someone else's hobbies, and you should be able to freely spend, you know, the money that's left over after you've paid for necessities. You should be able to freely spend that on your interests as you desire if you've earned that money. But then there's a sort of little mitigation of, but you can take that too far, and that this guy has actually become obsessed and unhealthy. So I think that's interesting that they prefaced this 500 a month is too much with this sort of construction of, I don't want to be the person who says to my significant other that they can't do something with their own hard-earned cash. Yeah, we've got another, I'm glad they broke up because he's a horrible person. And then they're talking about, this was a man who refused to go out and buy his girlfriend feminine hygiene products when she was on her period, basically. And this person, again, we've got one of these well-reasoned judgments where a lot of people brought in personal experience as being a cashier because this man had said basically, no, I can't go to the shop and buy these feminine hygiene products because other people are going to look at me and judge me for buying them. And lots of people came to show an understanding that cashiers actually don't care what you're buying, and they're just scanning them, and they're not looking, and they're not judging you. And then we've got other people who bring in sort of psychological perspectives, again, showing what's right and what's wrong in terms of people's behaviour towards each other. And we have quite a lot of things like this, where people bring in ideas about like red flags and abuse and gaslighting. And often they will like bring in I don't know, phone numbers to like helplines, or they'll say, if you're in a relationship like this, for God's sake, get counseling, this sort of thing. So people will bring in like legitimate, serious resources with the intent of maybe helping someone who is having the same problem as this original poster. So also on the subject of the moral order, here we have collected and put into a graphical format the responses to the polls that were posted by donor interns on our top 10 posts that had polls. So there's only 7 here because actually the ITA account was created first, and then a few of the historic, very popular polls that have made it into our top posts, that have made it into our top 10 didn't have associated polls with them. So we've got 7 basically. And you can see here that community agreement is like 72% and above for every single post. And what's interesting also is that often the second most popular judgment is the everyone sucks here judgment, which is the red one on this graph. So if people can't pinpoint a particular wrongdoer, they will go for the everyone's wrong rather than showing a sort of opposite opinion. So we don't often get a sort of you're the asshole and not the asshole in sort of polarity, if that makes any sense. People will often go to the no assholes here or everyone sucks here option rather than choosing the one which would be in like direct opposition to what the main community is choosing. And that's really interesting because, as I said earlier, participation in polls, you don't see what everyone else has chosen until you've clicked. But of course, you might get an idea of where people are going to go with their vote from reading the comments before you vote. But since voting is anonymous, even if you've maybe got the opposite opinion and you don't want to post a comment showing that opinion because you don't want to get the whole community like piling on you, you could still vote the other way in the poll because no one would know. But we don't see a lot of that happening. But we do see people criticising other people's votes. So again, doing their identity construction and doing their understanding of the moral order by saying how other people's understandings are misplaced or wrong. So we've got a kind of meta commentary sort of, you know, people criticise the votes of other people. So it's a moral judgment upon someone else's moral judgment. So this person is saying, I feel like a lot of the everyone sucks here voters are missing the part where a white woman is making fun of a happy child's culturally significant name, but hanging up in a huff when her sister calls her out on naming her child McKennedy. So this is again the 2 sisters, one with the mixed race child who gave them a heritage name from their husband's culture, and one who made this sort of horrendous portmanteau of 2 existing names. And again, we have, this is the, am I the asshole for ruining Christmas and New Year's Eve, this couple who were criticised for not having babies. That also the people who were replying, everyone sucks here, have been the ungrateful guest of a fantastic host who they take advantage of probably more than once. So this is, you know, putting an identity upon those people who were voting in the opposite direction, and by association claiming a kind of opposite identity for themselves. And we also have this like really interesting graph that was put together. This was put together from Reddit, and I'm not sure if how many posts they actually collated to make this graph, but someone sort of statistically worked out that if you were posting about certain others, what was your likelihood of being judged the asshole, which is kind of really interesting. And I don't 100% know sort of what to do with this, but we'll probably use it when we come to compare Reddit and Twitter, perhaps. But it certainly looks from this like we're going to find a lot of similarities between the Reddit commenters and the Twitter commenters, because this is showing kind of a similar understanding here. But yeah, that's just quite interesting that statistically, if you post about a certain other person, it's more likely that you're the one who's in the wrong.
Yes, just to finish some conclusions. Thank you very much for bearing with us through this lengthy presentation. But basically, what we've seen and what we're trying to show you is that the affinity space created around this Twitter account is incredibly complex. There are many participants in place with different roles who have many different ways of showing their engagement, be it through simple likes or just comments, but even though there are users with specific knowledge and contributions to the community, at the same time, anyone can just say anything they want, because even though we have tried to look at the comments that have more engagement, likes and retweets at the same time, there are many comments who do not have which do not have anything, not a like, but they still participate and they still build or helped to build this community even further. And we believe that although this is the case of one specific Twitter community, there are many elements that can be replicated that could be found in other similar communities. Maybe not even those communities that, let's say, are organized around the repost from somewhere else, maybe even other social media platforms as well. And it is very interesting for us to see that considering that this community has a very impolite name with the name asshole in it, it is in the end a way for individuals to just share their views and kind of acknowledge each other and be affiliative and build solidarity and rapport among them through their shared understanding of the moral order, how they view the world, what's right and what's wrong through the same light and from the same perspective. And what we intend to do with this research is, first of all, an article that would focus on the community. And this is a community, how it works. These are the participants within it. Then we would very much like to compare Twitter and Reddit following suggestions from the IPRA panel. It was suggested to us that it would be very interesting to see how the comments on both social media platforms would differ or not. Maybe not, we would have to see. And then because we are so interested and it is so obvious in many cases, we want to look at the moral order in more detail and see how it is constructed both linguistically and through multimodal and many devices that can just reflect people's views on many topics and issues.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much.
We do have a few slides of references. I'll just put them up quickly as well so that they're captured by the screen capture that we're doing.
Thank you.
So anyone, I guess, can pause on these if they end up rewatching. Or I can send people the references as well if you're interested in sort of similar things.
Thank you very much, Alba and Liz. It was a very crowded paper, and I think we all enjoyed that it was so long because there was so much of things for everybody to look at, and you certainly have more than 3 papers coming out of it if you want.
Yeah, we both discussed that we could probably write a whole book just on this community.
But, okay, then I think it's time to thank you once more, and thank you, Alba, for joining us. And thank you for the audience all over the place, including the UK.
There was a chat. Anthony says, thank you both of such a rich, varied and thoughtful presentation.
Oh, thanks,
really NAH.
Nice.
So now that we can be live, so a big applause.
Thank you. Thank you.